Right, welcome back, guys. This is Val, and we're gonna be talking about the next point, which is using HDRIs. And this opens up new possibilities, but also new limitations that you need to be aware of. So first of all, there is a great set, which I highly recommend. Just look it up here, which is called Skies of Iridiance. And obviously, loading such a set has clouds both up and down. You know, most HDR maps are meant for um, a beach setting, which has a ground, which you can place object on, like people, right? But this one doesn't. It doesn't have any ground. It's more like it's skies all over the place. So this is just perfect for such images and renders. What's cool about HDR maps is that you don't have any settings over here. You don't have like time and so forth, so you cannot move the sun. It is where it is. What you can do, obviously, is still play with the bloom filter. I'm going to turn it off for a while. And so what's great about this is that you suddenly have a beautiful cloud setting to play with. You can still rotate the dome. So you can go ahead and do, for instance, dome rotation. Rotate it slightly. This will now come at a different angle and change how it looks like. The thing is, you cannot change the clouds in this case, and the sun, they follow. So if you rotate everything, including the sun, the sky, the cloud pattern, and the lighting. Everything follows when you rotate. As you zoom in, you see less of the background, which is awesome, right? Now what you also can do is use the camera and turn on depth of field. This will blur the map behind. Let me just here in the top view locate the ship's nose, so we can see the camera goes here. There is a blue line. I want to just adjust the focal distance so that the red line goes through the nose of the ship. Then we'll lower this to maybe around 22 to get a more blurry look and feel. So that's what you can do with this. Now there is no other settings you want to do here. You don't want to have the ground on, because if you have it on, it will start casting shadows, so you don't want to do that. If you want to, let's say the ship is flying here and you wanted to cast kind of like a soft shadow, because clouds do receive shadows, all right? What you can do is two things. First, you turn on the ground. This will cast a pretty nasty shadow, right? But then you turn to manual ground position mode and you move the ground origin Y setting way below the ship. This now casts a shadow underneath, and you cannot change how sharp the shadow is. The shadow comes from the light source, which is baked into the HDR map, so you don't have control over that. But what you can do is adjust the ground shadow intensity at the bottom to maybe 0.1. This will now create 0.2. This will now create a less intense shadow that would probably look like something being cast by the ship. All right, really cool. Now some other things you can do here is obviously dome rotation X. This, let me just back it off a little bit so you can see what's going on here. Well, normally when you rotate, you go around the ship and the sun follows and all that, right? But you can also tilt it using the X rotate. This is like skewing it up and down, so to speak. If you picture a football, dome rotation is like turning the football around right and left, and this is like like you will kick the ball and it will just spin towards another person, let's say that, and it will just spin on the ground. And this X has that same effect. You're kind of spinning it around the ship. So if you turn it around, you know, quite a lot, you will eventually end up upside down, which is also something cool, because you can then kind of fake that the ship is doing loops or something, you know, and it's being upside down. So you can go ahead and do that. Let me turn off the shadow. Another thing you can do while still being in here is obviously go to tone mapping. You can still adjust tone mapping here and do, for instance, something magenta, which will then create something greenish, right? So you can still adjust the color scale. And again, something blue tinted will be more warm, and something orangish will be a bit more blue tinted. So you can still have control over those things. Another thing that you have control over is still, like I said, the bloom filter. So you can still apply the bloom filter on top of everything else, and, you know, change the appearance. As you can see, the bright stuff will start glowing, and it will change how this looks like, how it behaves, and create kind of like a, almost like an aura effect, like a blooming, glowing fog effect, if you will. So this particular set, obviously the Skies of Viridian, is a pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, it's meant for aerial renders, right? So it's just breathtaking the way it looks, and I'll just turn off bloom here, and it's just beautiful. The same rules apply as we talked about in the other video. When you zoom in and so forth, use depth of field and so forth. So those still apply with the camera, and also being close and going wide and so forth. Now, so this, you know, kind of Sky or Iridian set is kind of a no-brainer. Like I said, it has only cloud, up in the cloud renders or maps, both day and night. Now, if you go and use something else, let's say we use Cake and Bob's set here, and we use the no depth of field version, and we just say use a beach setting, okay, 8K. The problem with the beach is that it is a beach. It well, kind of goes against what we've just been covering, right? But the thing is, if you want to use normal maps like this one and still use it for like aerial renders, what you can do is go underneath the ship. When you have the ground turned on and you go underneath the ground level, the ship becomes invisible. So you got to turn off the ground. Turn it off, then the ship is again visible. Now you can go really low and aim the camera up, and that way use aerial renders from below. So you still can go around a little bit, but obviously it just goes without saying, as you start, you know, moving the camera up a little bit, you see the ground and you are no longer up in the air. But if you're really low and you zoom in, you cannot see that you're on the ground. So these type of renders will still work great with any map, regardless of, you know, as long as you have a sky visible, you can still do aerial renders like this using those, right? And the same rules apply here. You can still go zoom in here and for instance use depth of field. So let's turn on that depth of field and use a pretty narrow effect, so you can blur the background more and achieve different types of renders. So that's still doable here. Another thing you can do, let's turn off the depth of field, is this. Let's say you are over here. Let's say I just load a different set just to show something else. Let's say the Costa Brava 8K. Okay, and this set has a beautiful beach setting. And let's turn off the ground so I can get underneath the ship. One thing many people don't think about is that you can turn a map upside down. Like I said, you can rotate it to go around, but then you can also use the dome, where is it? Here, dome orientation X, and pretty much turn completely upside down. This means that you can suddenly get on top of the ship and do renders that look like this. As long as you're really high up, nobody will know that you are really using an inverted, HDR map. HDR maps don't have controls for the sun and sky individually, but you can always go in here and select, let me just locate it, intensity. So you can select 3, which will then give you more of everything. Alright? So this is still a possibility to use the maps upside down and use a slightly different approach to it. It will still look aerial. Alright, so that was a little bit about HDR maps, and as you start to notice here, each way has its pros and cons. And like I always teach to my students, is that there is no perfect solution. Each solution has always some kind of pros and always some kind of cons, and that depends on your situation, depending on your render, depending on your project, what you aim to do, and your limitations and all that. So that was a little bit about HDR maps, which are great, right? Now let's talk about using static backgrounds in the next video. All right, thanks for watching. See you soon.